Jack, Annie, come here, she called. She held out her arms. Morgan, cried Annie. She ran to Morgan and threw her arms around the enchantress. Jack stood up, still holding the empty cup. He ran to Morgan and hugged her too. We did what the Christmas night told us to do, said Annie, brought back the water of memory and imagination. But I dropped the cup, said Jack, and I spilled all the water. But the water made a gold cloud, said Annie, and everyone came back to life. Morgan laughed with amazement. You have just returned from the other world, she asked. Yes, said Annie. A white stag brought us back, said Jack. He turned to King Arthur. Your Majesty, he said, we have good news. Your knights are safe. Sir Lancelot said to tell you they'll be home before the first night of the new year. The king looked bewildered. You found them? Yes, they're all fine, said Annie. Here, said Jack, handing the silver cup to the king. Please give this back to Sir Galahad, and this to Sir Lancelot, said Annie. She took the glass key from around her neck and gave it to King Arthur. Oh, and this to Sir Percival, said Jack. He pulled the wooden compass box from his pack and gave it to the king. At first King Arthur was too stunned to speak. Then he clapped his hands and laughed joyfully. Thank you, he said to Jack and Annie. The knights of the Round Table all cheered. Ring the bells, King Arthur shouted. Call the people of Camelot to the castle. They have already gathered outside the doors, your Majesty said. A page. Bring them in, said King Arthur. We must rejoice together. Queen Guinevere smiled at Jack and Annie. Her eyes sparkled now. Once again, you have helped save Camelot, she said. Thank you very much. You're welcome, said Jack and Annie together. Then Jack heard the sounds of children talking and laughing. He turned to see a crowd of people streaming through the arched doorway of the great hall. They carried candles, a giant fir tree, and boughs of holly and pine. Musicians followed them with stringed instruments. As everyone started to decorate the hall, the musicians began playing and singing a beautiful Christmas carol. Jack, said Annie, look! The white stag was standing in the arched doorway. Jack turned excitedly to Morgan. See that? White stag, he said. He took us to the other world. See him? Morgan smiled. Yes, I do see him, she said, and now I see everything. Jack looked back at the doorway. The stag was gone. In the place stood an old man with long white beard. He held a staff and wore a flowing red cloak, the same cloak Jack and Annie had worn on their quest. Who's that? Jack asked. That is Merlin the magician, said Morgan. It was Merlin who invited you there. Here. I see that now, Merlin, said Jack. He sent us the royal invitation. Yes, said Morgan. Then he put the rest of us under a spell, and he carried you to the other world. No, said Annie. The Christmas night put you under a spell, and the white stag carried us to the other world, said Jack. Morgan smiled. Merlin was both the Christmas night and the white stag, she said. Remember, he's a magician, not a mortal. He can change his shape. whenever he wishes. Oh wow, whispered Annie. Why did Marilyn do these things? Asked Jack. Marilyn was angry when King Arthur banished magic from Camelot, said Morgan. I see now he finally took matters into his own hands. How? Said Jack. He knew King Arthur would send no more knights to the other world for the water of memory and of imagination, said Morgan. So I assume he brought you to Camelot, hoping that you would offer to go instead. Why did he want us to go? Asked Annie. Marilyn has often heard my tales of your adventures in the treehouse, said Morgan. He knows you both have a great desire to fight for the good, and he knows you use the gift of imagination very well. Those are two special qualities needed to success in any quest. Jack and Annie looked back at Merlin from far across the room. The white-bearded magician smiled at them. He raised his staff, then he slipped out the door. Jack looked around the great hall. All the candles and torches were lit now, a fire blazed in the hearth. The musicians were playing, everyone was singing. The room glowed with warm firelight and rosy faces. At last, Christmas in Camelot was just as Jack and imagined it would be. The spell of the dark wizard had been broken. The great hall was filled with beauty and love and joy and light. Chapter 16. Welcome home. Wake up, Jack, said Annie. Jack opened his eyes. He was lying in the dark on the wooden floor of the treehouse. Through the window he saw the cloudy sky above the Frog Creek woods. Time to go home, said Annie. Oh, I must have fallen asleep, said Jack. I had the most incredible dream. I dreamed that we went to Camelot. It was Christmas in Maryland. That wasn't a dream, said Annie. It was. Really? You fell asleep at the round table during the party. King Arthur carried you to the treehouse, and I made the wish for us to come home. Jack sat up. Seriously? He whispered. Seriously? She said. Jack? Annie? Their mom called in the distance. Coming! Annie shouted out the treehouse window. She turned to Jack. Let's go. I mean, seriously? It really happened. Jack asked Annie again. Yes, really, she said. She held up the royal invitation. See? Proof. Oh, yeah, he whispered. This time, the letter M stood for Marilyn. Not Morgan, said Annie. Jack smiled. Thanks, Marilyn, he said softly. Jack picked up his backpack. Then he and Annie started down the rope ladder and headed home. As they walked through the deep December twilight, snowflakes started to fall. By the time they left the woods and headed down the street, snow was swirling everywhere. Ahead they could see the house glowing with lamplight. Their mom was waiting on the front porch. Hi, Mom, said Annie. Hi, Mom, said Jack. Hi, kids. Did you have a good day? She asked. Yeah, said Jack. Pretty good, said Annie. I'm glad, said their mom. Welcome home. She held the door open and Jack and Annie slipped inside. The house felt extra warm and cozy. Good smells came from the kitchen. Jack and Annie took off their snow-covered jackets, then headed up the stairs. In the hallway, Annie turned to Jack. Merry Christmas, she said simply. Merry Christmas, he said. Annie slipped into her room and Jack into his. Jack closed his door and sat on his bed. He took his notebook out of his pack and opened it. His spirits sank except for the three rhymes. He'd taken no notes on the journey. Not one. Exhausted, Jack lay back on his bed. He squeezed his eyes shut. He tried to remember the details of the adventures in Camelot. In the other world, he could feel the terrible chill in the great hall. When Morgan was frozen, he could hear the joyful music as the winged dancers danced around in the circle. He could taste the sweet, bitter, spicy taste of the water of memory and imagination. Jack sat up all at once. He felt very awake. He turned to a clean page in his notebook. He grabbed his pencil and wrote, "It all started when we saw the white dove in the twilight." Using his memory in his imagination, Jack kept writing, doing his part to keep the legend of King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table, Merlin and Morgan Le Fay alive as the snow swirled outside his window. Jack wrote and wrote and wrote. He didn't stop writing until he had written down the whole story. His story of the Christmas in Camelot. The end.